to the Two Marks, exclusively on the Pod Station.
Welcome listeners to a new show brought to you by the Two Marks. This time we're discussing Loki Season 1, and once again the Two Marks are delivering an irreverent review, providing you lively debate, conversation and social commentary. Will wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff blow Mark's mind? Will we get through the episode without a little wee coming out? Is the lift system at the TVA as complicated as Star Trek Discovery's turbo lifts? How many Lokis does it take to create a Marvel show? All this and more will be unpacked in this week's episode. Let me introduce my friend and co-host, Mr. Mark Pollard.
Hi mate.
Are you well?
I'm very good. I had to lie down before we did this show for obvious reasons in your intro, which was the time element.
Every time.
Just tried to think of things and then gave up as quickly as I started.
I think this episode was easy on you.
Well, yes and no, because it's posed questions, which I'm sure we'll come to later, that I feel will probably kill me.
Well, the good news is it's only 6 episodes in the season, so it might be short-lived.
Indeed. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, yeah. Nice to see you back.
We haven't given this show a name, have we really? Or have we? I don't know. This is a director's meeting right here, right now, people. This is you watching behind the curtain.
I think this one comes under the Two Marks branding, and I just give it different music.
Excellent. There you go, people. You heard it here first.
That was our meeting done. That is the extent of our meeting.
I'll minute it.
I'll second it. It's carried. Done.
This is the first time we've done one of these of the Marvel TV world, largely because we haven't actually got around to organising ourselves in time for doing the other stuff. But we have done something similar with Star Trek, where when the more recent seasons have come out, we've done a week-by-week digest of each episode, just because we can. Hopefully people might find it of interest, because I know when I'm watching these shows, my whole universe just closes around this one tiny little thing. I get as much of it as I possibly can between now and the next episode, then watch the episode as quickly as possible, and then just repeat the cycle for the next 6 weeks. Quite frankly, any podcast that doesn't have Loki in the title is going to be of little interest to me.
Just going to hoover it all up.
Yeah, it's just going to be...
But that's good.
It is good, and it's great because we didn't quite organise ourselves quick enough to do WandaVision and Captain... well, it wasn't Captain... Spoiler alert. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So we're going to do some retrospective ones. Theoretically, WandaVision's episodes 1 to 6 will be out by the time you hear this, and the other ones will be with you momentarily. What do you mark?
By the time this is uploaded, WandaVision, our first episode of 3 episodes, will be live.
Ooh.
Quickly followed by...
And just for the record, people, quickly is a loose term.
It's a term used often, bearing in mind this is a timey-wimey show. In some variants, there is another version of me. He just edits. That's all he does. He doesn't do anything else. He's a variant the TVA are chasing down at the moment.
Quick question. When you heard the phrase variant used in this episode, did you just get this natural twitch?
Okay.
You're like, oh shit, another variant.
Another one, yeah. Which one are we on now? I've lost track.
Does the vaccination work against this one?
I think what happens is, if you're a variant, they just eradicate you.
Well, if we could apply this in real life, it would have been so much simpler.
We haven't even recorded episode 3 of our WandaVision.
No, we haven't.
So I can't edit something that doesn't exist.
No.
But in the future, maybe it does.
But maybe it doesn't. Perhaps we all recorded all of them at the same time, but in the other alternate universe. But anyway.
And it was erased.
Yeah.
See where this is going. In reality, we will have WandaVision, which is one episode that covers 3 episodes in real time.
Well, we didn't feel like doing a ball-by-ball commentary for something that's been out for 3 months and everyone's moved on from mid much sense, did we? So we sort of compacted it slightly.
The episodes of WandaVision are not enough to justify a whole show for essentially a 19-20 minute episode.
No.
I think the way we've done it is the best way to do it.
Oh, quite frankly, we're always right.
What were you saying before about self-determinism?
Don't be spoiling my 2 lines of notes before we've even got started.
I'll take that bit out. I work for the TVA.
Oh my god, you are the TVA of the podcasting world.
Let's get on to the important part of how people can get hold of us.
This is going to be on the Two Marks channel, so if you go onto all of the major podcast platforms and type in the Two Marks, you should see us there. If you subscribe to that channel, you'll actually get all of our stuff. We put everything on there, as well as on the separate channels for some of the more other nuanced stuff. So if you're a Star Trek fan, we do a Star Trek Discovery show called Disco Fever. If you're a Star Trek Picard fan, you can find our Pick Hard Talk show. We do a film policy where we cover films, but as I say, all of that's on the 2 marks, so if you can't be asked even trying to contemplate what it is I'm talking about, just go to the 2 marks. You can check us out on social media as well. We're on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. On the Instagram and the Facebook ones, we post reviews of stuff. If you want to find something to watch on a weekend and you're struggling to think, if you can go on there, actually you can find stuff that may be of interest. It might help you avoid some of the pitfalls that we have. I'm trying to remember what the film was now. It's the one where Tom Hardy was playing Capone. Yes. Well, had I have known about my social media channels and that there was a review on there, I might have checked it out first and realised that it was dog shit and saved myself 2 hours of my life that I will never get back.
We put the work in so you don't have to.
Exactly. Although you have to trust on the basis that our tastes are right. We obviously think they are, but then again, we've never looked in the mirror, so there are other things which we perhaps fall at massively. Hey, you be the judge of it. Go on there, find it, and if you fundamentally disagree with our review, tell us.
That's the best way. In fact, usually our likes and interests are aligned. Even though we watch them separately, we normally give them a similar star rating.
Yeah.
But that's only an army of 2.
Yes.
50% of the time we could be right. We have the Patreon.
Patreon.com/the pod station. Just go give us some money. That'd be nice.
I was going to say we're going to be putting special offers on things so people can...
Clearly doing the tactful approach. Give us some money. Or if you want to sponsor the show as well. I mean, listen, we will whore ourselves out to anything. We've had the offers of the old manscaping products.
They were after us, weren't they?
They were. We haven't yet done it. Well, we weren't convinced whether it was real or not. It felt inherently dodgy from the way in which it was contacted, but, you know, listen, if you're a legitimate business and you sell those products, I'm happy to have a go. I'll even do a live advert to talk to you about whether it's any good.
Subscribers if you did a live advert.
Put the video on YouTube, which also we have a channel of where you can hear the show, so go check that out.
Yeah, there's no visual yet, is there?
No, we haven't yet got to that point of our lives.
We're trying to build an audience, aren't we? New manscaping.
Just our mugs pop up on the screen and everyone goes, unsubscribe.
Yeah, delete. I thought when you got the invitation for the manscaping stuff, it was some sort of Chechen rebel cell that was trying to fund its campaign. It's just as well we ignored it because we need to be careful who we align ourselves in.
But we are where we are. We're here, and we're here to entertain you. Hopefully it'll be useful. Hopefully we'll discuss some stuff that might be of interest. I'm hoping how many pages have you got there of your note?
4.5.
So Mark has 4.5 notes of good shit to talk about this show. I have 4 lines to remind. I'll just give you my opinion, which counts for little, and Mark will give you some proper Easter eggs and information and what have you, which is good. I need some information because there was lots of this that left me slightly tantalizingly intrigued. Should we start by discussing what our first impressions were of this show?
Yeah.
Do it. I'm asking you, Mark. I care.
Very excited about this show and have been since it was announced. There's a couple that I'm aware of that are coming through show-wise that I'm really, really excited about. This one out of the 3 that they are, I know What If is on the cusp of being released, but that's more cartoony stuff. This is the one I've been most excited about and actually really glad episode 1 didn't disappoint.
Yeah.
The way they've approached it, WandaVision, it's a different type of story. Unless you're a comic book fan, you don't really know where it can go. And the same with Falcon and Winter Soldier. Whereas Loki, I don't think you particularly need to know too much about the comics. Loki's been one of the main characters from the very, very beginning. If it was Captain America, obviously he was one of the Avengers from the very beginning, so you'd have more involved emotionally with him. Wanda, Vision, Winter Soldier and Falcon have come in.
But you didn't really know a huge amount insofar as you had no real rapport. Loki's been in and around. He's sort of a grade A character based on the universe so far.
You've seen him 10 years of him popping up. You're already invested, aren't you? Out of all the villains you've ever had, he had a really good story arc. He's changed from being the mischievous god wanting to kill them all in Avengers Assemble at the end, wanting to save his brother. Now we're picking him up again in a different variable.
Well, we're picking him up at the most evil point.
Well, he's gone back now, hasn't he, to when he was being
a knob. He was super knob. He got brought down a peg or two and then learned some life lessons and was still a bit of a knob, but less of a knob. Whereas at this point, we are at the height of his knobbiness.
What did you think?
I really enjoyed it. This was what I felt WandaVision lacked in those first 3 episodes. This was what they should have done with their first 3 episodes. There was a lovely balance between picking up where Endgame film left off, so sort of explaining some of the effects of what happened in that film. It was a nice balance between explaining where we're going and digging into the character as well, and having a bit of action and comedy. It was a lovely balance of all those things. I have to say, I still remain slightly frustrated that Marvel don't release maybe the first couple of episodes. So if there's 9 episodes in the season like there was with WandaVision and Falcon, I think they could release maybe the first 2 or 3 and then release them weekly after that. Because there's only 6 here, maybe release the first 2, because I feel the first one sort of wets your taste buds but doesn't give you enough to get stuck into it, whereas I feel after a couple of episodes you get a vibe of where it's going, and I feel you're better able to digest and assess the show.
That's a good thing to do, but I also recognise that, well, 2 things. They want to keep the retention of subscribers, but also, as was mentioned in our WandaVision show, these are springboards. The way these shows are set up, I think, are to either conclude the story of the OG Avengers or spiral it off into another next phase where we get introduced to new characters. And as we know, we've had this all the time where people have gone, oh, what about doing this, what about doing this? And actually Marvel have always been one step ahead in their creative, whether it's been retconned in or they've listened to the fans. Fantastic scene in Endgame where all of the female characters appear briefly. Now, some people thought it was a bit glib, some people thought it was good because it showed female empowerment. Actually, all that told me, strong female characters have always been woven into the film
the universe.
They've always been there. Every film you could go Captain Marvel, Rescue, or Pepper Potts. All of them have always been there. Black Widow was in Iron Man, always been there. They actually have their own comic where all the female superheroes are a team. That's what I saw as the nod, which was they've just gone back to the fans, whereas a lot of people going, oh yeah, Marvel's shown us women empowerment. It's always been there. These shows, I think, are going to be a springboard to the next thing. For example, this is going to lead into Doctor Strange 2, then you've got Secret Wars coming up, you've also got Armor Wars, which picks up with Tony Stark, and you've got all the other characters that have come back. You've got She-Hulk, she's going to have Daredevil in it. I always think, just wait and see what happens.
This first episode was the best first episode of the 3 shows we've seen so far, in getting that nice balance between warming up, doing the intro, laying the foundations, but giving enough where at the end of that episode I was like, yeah, I feel like I've had a good chunk of flesh from that.
It didn't feel like it was too overwhelming.
No. I'll say yeah. I'll say no, having then quite literally passed out trying to figure out some of the questions on the time and what happens now he's not in that timeline, and does that change, and I'm sure we'll come to that.
Well, let's give the synopsis of this episode.
Do it.
Loki, the god of mischief, finds himself out of time and in an unusual place and forced, against his godly disposition, to cooperate with others.
I mean, you've just started in your little synopsis there with one of the key things, which is in his godly manner, because in this episode you have to question what the definition of a god is, because we've been led to believe that Thor and Loki are the Norse gods, they are gods, but actually do they just have magic powers that make them godlike? Because these time dudes seem able, well, the Infinity Stones, the Infinity Stone bit itself is evidence of just how powerful these time folk are, because the Infinity Stones mean nothing to them. They don't even work in this universe, and yet you've got Loki and Thor who were getting defeated and wiped out and destroyed by these things.
So I'm going to quickly try to explain.
Excellent. This is what I hope you were going to do from your 4.5 pages of notes.
Well, the things you just mentioned aren't in there.
Ooh.
I'm going to freestyle it.
Woohoo! Brace yourself, people.
Thor is a god of Asgard. Don't forget, Loki is an adopted son and is in fact the offspring of the frost giants. The life model decoys. You've not seen Agents of... You have seen Agents of
Yes, I have.
The life model decoy is what Tony Stark made, and then they threw it into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Wasn't Coulson one of them?
Well, he ended up being one. Multiple times he died. The lady who was stuffed in the cupboard. Well, why have you got a lady in the cupboard? Because you're not a 12-year-old teenager.
Or a serial killer.
But the difference is she was still talking. She was a life model decoy that he was programming, and then, as you quite rightly say, Agent Coulson became one. He died. So they did what they kind of did in Picard, spoilers, and take his essence and shove it in an android. There was a combination of him worried about being a robot and also whether he'd been copied, because I actually made a note. In 2009...
So did I.
Loki died. 2012, he stole the Tesseract. 2013, he died again. 2017, he stole the Tesseract. 2018, he died again. And 2019, he stole the Tesseract. Boom.
Now, is that why he was nervous about going to the thing? Because he wasn't sure whether technically he is a robot?
He's probably a bit confused at this point. He is the alternate version, because what has happened is he's created a branch timeline. So when he landed in the Gobi Desert, and immediately, which was hilarious, because first thing he did is he saw an audience of people and stood on a podium. They don't speak English.
His full knobbiness came out.
Straight away. Suddenly the door opened, which was a little bit similar, because I've got it in me further information.
Your Easter eggs notes are going to be ruined because of all my stupid questions, aren't they?
They're all out of, they'll be out of sequence, so you're going to have to forgive me, but I basically put teleport technology similar to that used in Legends of Tomorrow, which is a DC show.
Right.
And so what they have is like a door opened and you just walk through. It's a better thing than Transporter or some other clever thing like a TARDIS. So they appear, and then he suddenly lose interest in those and start speaking to the people with the weapons, promptly gets owned.
I think that was hilarious. I think there was a lovely balance here between some really emotionally heavy lifting. The scene between Mobius and Loki, where they're in his office and he's really drilling deep into his emotional psyche, is quite a heavy lifting thing, and where he starts showing the pictures and the videos of his mum being killed and the fact that it was his fault because he'd sent him that way was obviously quite hard hitting. I mean, it's watching someone getting slowly dismantled, and by the same token you have the absolutely hilarious scene where he gets clocked in the face with that stick and it goes into slow motion. You're just seeing his face, which is what happens to my face post lockdown, just when I go out in the wind, all that fat just floats around and
I know you're feeling the pain in real time.
In real time. Yeah, I thought things like that were really, really funny, and I think this is where they got the balance for everything just absolutely spot on. I loved it. I thought it felt a bit Umbrella Academy with the Time Office thing in season 2 of the Umbrella Academy, if anyone's watched it, and they're doing the whole time thing. It felt a bit like that with the way they've got these just ordinary workers doing ordinary jobs in almost like a corporation that's run by people who were in charge of time.
There's lots of shows that are on that have just 1960s, 70s style offices just flanked with filing cabinets and oval television screens. I think it's quite stylish. It's sat well because I suppose they have like extreme technology because they're kind of sitting outside of all of these variants and these timelines, and they've just got a screen keeping an eye on it because you see the vistas that it's a massive place. What I liked is the intro because they've taken, now it could be a combination because I know they filmed more stuff for Endgame which replicated the other perspective of what had been filmed in Avengers Assemble, so I don't know whether they've spliced those two scenes together to create the intro of how we end up getting the Tesseract again and getting thrown into the Gobi Desert, but I thought there was a nice intro.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, because you got the Hollywood level, it's a multi-billion pound film franchise, just grabbing it and making that all from his perspective.
It's what I love most about these kind of shows. It's that interwoven interconnectivity and just the ability to call back and introduce things, and everything they introduce and everything they mention you sort of get a little excited about because it's either something you know or it's something you suspect you should know, and then you want to go away and investigate it. Quality. I thoroughly enjoyed the introduction. I quite like the whole TVA thing going on. Just his first experiences of this, just watching him constantly getting done every single time, whether it be the sign here, this is what you said. Bearing in mind he's 1,000 years old.
I think you're going to say what I'm thinking.
I looked at that pile of paper and thought, I've said more shit than that, and I'm nowhere near 1,000 years old.
I sort of thought, that's one conversation.
Maybe Hawkeye's pile might have been like that, because he seems quite a stalwart, strong but silent type, whereas Loki, like you said, he landed in the Gobi Desert and immediately wanted to go in a speech. I mean, that speech alone probably was like 3 pages.
Absolutely, yeah. But once he gets through the metal detector or whatever it is,
which was funny.
Because it's a whistle-stop talk. I mean, he's beefed up. He's obviously just seen Thor, his brother's new guns.
Oh my god, I saw an Instagram post of him. Jesus Christ. I'm trying not to swear too much there, but by jingo, I got turned on just looking at that picture.
I believe that he's doing a biopic. He's playing Hulk Hogan. So he'll go straight into the next one. So compared to 2011 to that, it's like just boom, isn't it?
Oh, huge.
Buff.
Loki was looking tidy and ripped, and then obviously he had to do the deli counter ticket thing, which I thought was hilarious.
That's what it's like.
Yeah, when you go to passport control, you land at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's no fucker there.
And they go, you gotta go round, and it's like,
you gotta do the zigzag. All the other people from your airplane start to join, and so you're halfway through it, and then the next person comes through. There's just this ridiculous line of suitcases being pulled.
And then he gets the induction introduction with Miss Minutes.
Yeah, which felt a bit Jurassic Parky. Liked that.
Bit of a side thing, there's a game called Fallout 4 which I play, which has got an add-on of Nuka World, and it's a bit like Disney World, I suppose. And so they have this Coca-Cola bottle that has a face on it and gives you an induction to the theme park. Miss Minutes is voiced by Tara Strong, who is famously known for voicing several DC characters, many other characters, but was notably going to play Harley Quinn on DC's TV show The Arrow. However, at the time of filming it, when they were going to be introducing the Suicide Squad onto the Arrowverse, Warner Brothers were currently looking at doing the Suicide Squad film, which ultimately bombed. So they scrapped them being allowed to use her character in the show. The fact that she's voicing it, they've got some good talent.
Yeah, she seems to have done lots of voiceover stuff. Yeah, that was quite good. I have to say, I mean, put my legal head on for a second here. You're waiting to go in for trial and you don't take a ticket, so you get killed instantly. That's a bit like getting arrested for murder, going up for trial, and then the police killing you on the way to the courtroom. That didn't feel necessarily due process. The other thing I had a massive issue with, and this obviously then starts to dribble into the time debate, is he's up for trial for having breached time rules by having created a separate strand, and will get killed if found guilty, and was 100% likely to be found guilty. The Avengers, who massively played around with time, get a complete free pass, and the suggestion, oh well, that's all part of the tapestry, and yet what they did created the opportunity that Loki then took, which had to have therefore been made part of the tapestry. I mean, what he did that was different to what the Avengers did was absolutely zero, and yet they were like, yeah, no, we're just going to wave our hands and let that just wash away.
It was a Deus Ex Machina moment, which actually he was being true to form because he's a mischievous god, and they did in fact create the opportunity that allowed him to flit through time. You should have represented him.
I would have done. I'd have got him off. Loki, give me a call.
What I imagine this show will do, every time somebody clocks a plot hole, I guarantee this show will be time variance. He didn't do anything other than what was created. So if they hadn't have messed around with the time heist, the thing with that is, if they hadn't have dropped the Tesseract, he wouldn't have picked it up.
No.
So he wouldn't be there, and we wouldn't have a Loki show.
No. Yeah.
So it's all because of the Avengers.
Yeah. Kill them all. Time people, get the Avengers in, find them guilty. I mean, hang on a minute, let's take this another step further. Now I'm on my soapbox. I feel like I'm defending the wrong side here, but I'm going in all guns blazing. Captain America Steve Rogers, talk about someone fucking around with the timeline. He went back in time to enjoy the life he missed out on because of the Ice Cube incident. That isn't interfering with time. Was that okay? Well, I'm doing air quotes here, people, because it's not okay. It's exactly what Loki did and got stumped for it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because he did in fact create another branch timeline. I'm glad you're here because you're linking all these.
Oh, very good.
Did we see, I'll ask you if you saw it, did we see a Peggy Carter cameo? We're jumping about. He steals off Luke Wilson's character the little remote control that allows him to zoom across places. In the corridor behind him, those little portal doors open, and what looks like Peggy Carter, it isn't the actress who plays her. She's wearing the same hairstyle and same clothes. I wonder whether there was alluding to a cameo, because in the What If timelines, Peggy Carter becomes Captain Britain. Also, when Steve Rogers went back, created a branch timeline, and so maybe that was her being arrested.
Cards on the table. I've only watched this episode once. I didn't have time to watch it a second time before doing this. I am going to go away and watch it a second time, and hopefully we'll be able to pick up on a lot of the stuff I suspect I missed because I was just ridiculously excited about the fact it was on. I felt that was an outrageously poor show of justice on Loki's behalf, and he's not someone who you normally can argue for, but in this case I do feel he got the shitty end of the stick, so to speak.
No, I agree entirely. You picked up a lot of the things I had written down, because otherwise all my notes are worthless. But just on a side note, which has got nothing to do with the show, but just a little bit for the listeners, that Loki from Earth 1610 can retcon history into anything he desires by either creating events that never happened or erasing events as if they never happened.
Right.
From the comics.
Okay.
In the comics, Loki formed his own gang among like the Avengers called the Prime Movers, and that included Doctor Doom, Kingpin, Magneto, Mandarin, Red Skull, and the Wizard.
Right. So who are these time people? Because they seem to have an awful lot of say in what goes on in the universe, having just found Loki, the god of mischief, guilty of something that his brother Thor did exactly the same.
And the Timekeepers, not to be confused with the Watchers, I think were given permission by the Timekeepers to keep an eye on history. The Watchers tend to be omnipotent. They would go around making sure that people were following the path. The Timekeepers are the three faces appeared behind the judge when she was sentenced in Loki, and they gave authority to the Time Variance Authority to have one sacred timeline, so any branch of them is immediately destroyed. So it tells you that they don't mess around, which is why when that guy was messing around with the ticket, they just basically wiped him out of existence.
And so where do they sit in an importance level to people like the Eternals?
Well, they don't, because they're outside of that.
Right.
Because you've got the Celestials,
yeah,
and above the Celestials there's two others which I can't remember. So you've got Celestials that made man, the Deviants, and the Eternals, and there was three of them. And then the Eternals are basically to help humanity around. The Deviants were also around to them messing things up, but above them the Celestials. So nowhere that you saw in Guardians of the Galaxy that was a Celestial. We got a glimpse of the Celestials in both Guardians of the Galaxy. Ego was a Celestial, but he says in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 he's the last of the Celestials, so we don't know where they've gone. But then above them there was two lots, so one created the other, and so on and so forth.
Well, where's Thanos? Thanos was in
Thanos, he's a Titan. He's the brother of Star Fox.
And what's Star Fox?
He's an Eternal.
Okay.
Angelina Jolie's cousin is Thanos.
Right. So these lizard people just sit completely outside of that in their own little...
They're out of time, I suppose, and basically what they do is keep an eye on what they call the sacred thread.
But they're going to have a real problem, because do they realise that Marvel have called Doctor Strange's next movie the multiverse? Has someone given them the heads up on this? Because that might throw a spanner in the works when Doctor Strange comes along and goes, I'll take your sacred timeline and take an enormous dump on it, thank you, sir.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I too have an answer for that. In fact, Kevin Feige has gone on record saying that No Way Home, WandaVision, Loki and Doctor Strange 2 will all be connected. In fact, in the infomercial that Miss Minutes plays to Loki, but she uses the words madness and multiverse in her infomercial, which could be a little cheeky thing to the movie.
Right.
And so I imagine the curve with the movies and the two shows will culminate in Doctor Strange 2. They've just killed Doctor Strange 2 in the comics.
Right.
That's not to say in the MCU he's dying, by the way, but these people are coming out of contract now. What's his space?
I'm sure Benedict Cumberbatch has probably been signed up to 3 movies, maybe 3 Avengers movies, in the same way as Robert Downey Jr. and co were.
Probably.
Chris
then,
Evans.
For example, Samuel L. Jackson was signed up to, I think, 6 or something. They did a multiple picture deal and they put it in the contract, and they'll say, we might need you for 6 movies and 2 cameos. They've redone the contracts now because they didn't have TV.
This show is going to be so fascinating, because Loki was already an incredibly fabulous character. He was already very interesting as a character. But now we've got this whole nurture versus nature debate going on, because now he's prime knobness. So in the timeline we've watched him evolve from being a knob to being sort of broken down gradually, to the extent where I think in Thor 3, Thor just turned around and went, yeah, listen, you know what, quite frankly, don't give a flying monkeys what you get up to these days, because you're a knob, you're always going to be a knob, and you're going to keep on being a knob, and I just don't have the time or the energy for it anymore. Then they watched the destruction of Asgard, and then obviously Thanos comes into play, and very quickly you can see him evolve and almost dial his knobbiness right down. I mean, he'll never change completely, whereas now it's a case of how will he change, because he's almost had those life experiences that I've just described there in a 5-minute video.
No, absolutely.
He's just had it. He's gone, right, here's what happens in your other life. Now you know.
Well, it's the life less travelled, isn't it? It's the life he didn't have. He's now out of time because the branch that he was in, they've destroyed with that time bomb. Just briefly going back to answer the question you asked about the Infinity Stones in the drawer, the reason why they're worthless is because that just shows how many timelines they've destroyed, the trinkets now.
Right.
So they're still Infinity Stones, but the point for them to have as many as they do, that's how many timelines they've destroyed in which one of those was involved. Some of them are now paperweights. And also also, if you notice, the Tesseract isn't glowing as much as it was when he had it in the suitcase, which tells me that the power is diminishing.
He was found guilty and was going to get killed, erased from the universe, but that hasn't happened because they need him. They've almost shown him that to perhaps reduce his knobbiness to the point where they can work with him, because of course, spoiler alert, it turns out that he's the one who's given them loads of problems by killing all their team, and so they need Loki to catch Loki.
He says it's him. I would leave an open mind.
All right. Why? What makes you say that?
Don't forget, in different timelines there's different variants and there's different variations, and in the comics there's Lady Loki.
Right.
When he says it's you, looking at it from a time perspective, it's not actually him, and it's a different timeline, and therefore it's a Loki of that time.
Could be a woman. Okay. Because there's also a junior teen Loki, isn't there, who joins the Young Avengers, which seems to be something they're working towards. So that could be an interesting development, couldn't it? Whether they go down that route.
Yeah, because if you immediately think that it's another one of him.
The Spider-Verse?
Exactly right. If you think about every Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy, Miles Morales, they're all different Spider-Men, not the same Spider-Man.
Ah, okay.
So take the Spider-Verse.
That changes everything completely, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you think you're chasing down Loki and you go, Tom Hiddleston, all the time. But it's not. It's whoever became Loki based on the variations and variables of the time they were in.
Well, the time they were in, she might have had a baby girl instead of a baby boy.
Not had Thor and had a girl. Loki is a frost giant. In another timeline, they had Loki who isn't a frost giant. In another timeline, Thor might not exist and the Loki is the ruler of Asgard. There's loads of variations, and that's the point.
Ooh.
I'm going to make a prediction early on, and I'm going to say...
Oh, here we go, people. He always makes this mistake. He forgets it's recorded.
Two predictions I'm going to make. I'm going to say that I think Loki will turn up in Love and Thunder, that in episode 2 of Loki, we see the hooded person in the field that kills all the people is a female version of Loki.
Okay.
The reason why I'm saying about Love and Thunder is because in Endgame, before Loki dies at the hands of Thanos, he says to Thor, we will meet again and our faces will have our sunshine on it. I think this show do something timey-wimey that allows Love and Thunder to have him in it, considering that the love interest of Thor,
Natalie Portman,
becomes Thor.
Really? Do you think she'll become Thor?
In the comic, they killed off Thor and then they had a female Thor.
Okay.
I'm thinking that's going to be a homage to that.
Wow. Chris Hemsworth has hung around in the Marvel Universe longer than I think we all expected, because we were expecting him to probably have said farewell in Endgame when all the rest of the OGs have gone their separate ways. I suspect because they did such an amazing story arc with Thor, he probably wanted to hang around a bit more because they wanted to do more with that. At the end point of Avengers, Thor's an overweight state. He's just an absolute mess, isn't he?
He's in lockdown mode.
He's followed my approach to life.
Beer, pizzas, telly.
Gut. Long hair.
Oh, that's it. Right.
Oh my god, I've just realised I am obese Thor. But without the powers.
Good dad bod Thor.
Or the good looks. Or the witty charm.
You're a looker.
Oh, you say the nicest things.
I am seeing your face from behind the sound
Yeah,
shield.
there is a big black thing covering over my face.
It looks like there's an eclipse going past your mouth.
Yeah, the pop shield.
Yeah.
Which other characters were in this first episode that you... I mean, Owen Wilson, we should mention Morbius. I thought he was a fabulous character.
Well, the good thing with that, which I was quite excited about when they revealed that he was going to be in this, his brother, Luke Wilson, is one of the characters in the DC Arrowverse, Stargirl.
Oh, right. Owen Wilson's gone for the right one, if you ask me. I mean, he's always a very laid back. He's got a very clear style when he does acting. And certainly for this, he's quite an interesting character, is Mob. He was really understanding and quite sympathetic and empathetic towards Loki when they're having that conversation. By the same token, he didn't mind doing a literal kicking of shit of Loki when he needed it. So, for example, the whole time thing where he just rewound him back to the seat whenever he was getting all high and mighty again, he just, give him a good kicking and bring him back down to earth. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that character, because I can't decide whether he is just an employee of the time folk, just doing his job? Is he an extremist? Does he follow them?
Like a cult leader.
Almost like a cult follower of the time people, so he buys into everything they say? Or is there an element of him that questions it and is happy to push the boundaries and sees lots of grey where there might be black and white in other people's eyes? And will that add a nice little context to the Loki relationship, where you've always got Loki who's always going to push boundaries and always going to see how far into the grey he can go, and this other guy who will perhaps allow him to do that because he buys into that.
Good casting of Owen Wilson for the reasons you've already said. I think if we were to take your analogy of the building, the TVA is a corporation and all the ones wearing the uniforms are kind of your general workers. Next to Judge Rensayer, he is top level corporate. His character has a duality, because when he was speaking French to the kid, when we find out that he's been given bubblegum and then tells the kid to go and play, knowing full well that this grenade is going to wipe out the entire timeline. And I don't think the gravity of that, you're wiping out a history. So the point in France of where he goes to, he is going to wipe out everything back to the very beginning of time. Billions of people will die. We're talking mass slaughter on an epic level. The perfect combination is you have this mischievous god who's now got no powers, is humbled by where he is and the predicament he's in, has been shown a glimpse of the future that he's never going to have, knows he can't escape, knows he can't go back to his existing timeline, and there's another character who will do what needs to get done. And I think the two will somehow swap, or at least have a meeting of minds where they both either agree to do something good and leave a timeline which may cause problems for the multiverse. I think that's a really good dynamic.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how that goes. As you say, it sounds quite callous what he does, but it's like doctors. I mean, you think about doctors, what they do on a daily basis. They are some of the most brutal, callous human beings you've ever come across. I mean, orthopedic surgeons particularly. I used to know an orthopedic surgeon, and they would quite calmly talk as a matter of fact about how they sawed into the rib cages and then they cracked them open to do this, and then they hammered into that, and they have to snap this to get that. And you go, you do know that's a human being and those are bones, and if I even heard that noise, never mind saw it, or worse still, actually was the cause of it, I'd probably pass out. Whereas because they do it all day every day, it becomes just a matter of fact thing. It's not that they are callous people, it's just it's part of their job and it becomes the norm. He's a bit the same. I get the feel where because he's used to just putting these grenades to tidy up the timeline, it's now just the norm. Throw that on there, let's not think anymore about what it actually does. It just does the thing that I need to do as part and parcel of my job. So it might not be that he's cold and callous, it might just be he's become emotionally neutralized by that, having done it so many times. But maybe what Loki will introduce is reminding him of the impact and the consequences of that, maybe to the point where he goes against the whole sacred timeline ethos, which therefore allows for the multiverse, which then obviously feeds into everything that they're setting up at the minute.
Yeah, because he's desensitized, isn't he, at the moment?
Yeah.
He's carrying out the job.
But he's not completely desensitized, because when he was talking to that kid, he didn't need to. That was a waste of time. In fact, I think the other geezer came up behind him and went, right, come on, stop wasting time, let's just get on with this. He didn't need to interact with that character in the way that he did. He didn't need to be as nice to him. There was nothing he needed to do that he did in that scene. It was almost like that soft, understanding interaction. The kid doesn't need to know I'm just about to wipe him off the face of the universe. Go on, give me your bubblegum, off you pop. Why couldn't you have just kept the bubblegum, given that they were just going to wipe out the timeline? I was taking candy from a baby, literally, wasn't it? Rewind that, he's an arse. He stole candy from a baby. There is no redeeming of this character.
He was thinking of his teeth. It was 15th century France.
He's lucky he had any at that age.
Yeah. Maybe that's how they end up with no teeth in the future.
They just got bubblegum.
Everyone's got bubblegum. I think that was for the scene, because it was to show a duality. Clearly, the grunt with the gun wanted to just wipe it out and move on. He's trying to hunt down the prey, find out who's causing it all. The bubblegum is clearly a clue to something. We don't know what that is yet. That didn't need to be there. But I think for the purpose of building this character that we've just seen, we become emotionally attached. We've seen a side of him that isn't true to form.
I suppose it's a bit tropey insofar as he's that character that has enlisted Loki to catch Loki, whereas everyone else is like, we'll do it and let's just kill this Loki and move on to doing it, sorting the job ourselves, whereas he's that outside the box thinker. He goes, well, why don't we just use the actual Loki?
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And it also means we've got a show.
Yeah. What about the female soldier? Are there any characters in there who you know to be bigger characters than I might have picked up on just by virtue of the fact it's the first episode, so I don't really know how involved they're going to be, because the soldier who ends up getting the collar put on her and she's been dropped all over the show, I felt she possibly would have a bigger part to play, but I don't know whether that's just because she's a great character or whether she's actually someone in the comics.
I think she's just for the show. The one that has a link, Judge Renslayer.
Right.
Now, she shares her last name with Ravonna Rayslayer. That was the love interest of Kang the Conqueror. For those who are listening, want to check out our Black Widow podcast, I alluded to a prediction that I thought Kang the Conqueror would appear in one of the next phase Marvel movies, and actually has been confirmed as the villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Right.
Now, the reason why that's important is Kang the Conqueror has technology that allows him to travel in time.
Right. It feels to me like they're sort of branching off a couple of different threads that perhaps will come to some huge universal cataclysmic head in the same way as Thanos did. On the one hand, you've got the Eternals who are going to be doing stuff about the creation of stuff, and I've got no idea who the Eternals are, so I'm looking forward to that. You've got who are the ones who can transform into anything they want.
Oh, the Skrull.
With the Secret War stuff going on,
Yeah.
which creates a whole different arc in itself. You've got the multiverse stuff, which comes in direct conflict with the time people.
Yeah.
And the more that goes on with that, the more they're going to butt heads. So the more the multiverse stuff exists, the more people who can dick around with time exist. The more powerful those people are, the better they are able to challenge those time people. It sort of sounds like you're going to have a lot of different massive battles that may well come to a head at some point, with the likes of the Eternals having to go toe to toe with the time folk.
Well, I mean, the Eternals are pretty hardcore anyway.
But these time people are almost separated out, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're able... There must be something that will happen which hinders their powers and abilities, or they actually find they're not as powerful as they thought they were. There is a chink in their armour, and that allows the multiverse sort of to continue. It's almost like a cheat on Championship Manager from 1997, where if you bid the maximum amount, which was £20 million in those days, and the club accepted it, and then you went in and amended the offer to zero, you got the play for zero, but
Nice.
the computer still thought you were paying 20 million quid.
Days of the old cheats.
Yeah, which allowed you to buy whoever you wanted for nothing.
Remember those days where you could just do that?
There was always
Cool.
cheats. You used to watch Games Master.
Yeah.
In the UK, there was Games Master that used to give you a comic book with loads of little cheat tips. Push down, click A twice, do a full circle, stand on your head and click your magic fingers, and all of a sudden you couldn't die. You had infinite lives.
Where have those days gone?
Well, they might now exist in the Marvel universe. I think I've just uncovered it.
The only thing I noticed, Tom Hiddleston, I know, is executive producer on this.
Yeah.
He has technically a bit more control over the creative aspect.
So I heard an interview with Kate Herron, and she was explaining how Tom was involved because he'd played Loki for so long. They were looking at him to give guidance on what he had done and decided to evolve the character up to that point, because of course they're dialing it back in time, and so they were looking at how Loki would respond in a different set of circumstances. I suppose when he's an executive, and I don't know this, I'm just guessing, I suppose he's got the executive producer title more because without him, evolving that Loki character would have been substantially more difficult, because he's able to say, well look, Loki would probably do this and this is how he would have done.
It also means he's paying for some of the show.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, to be honest, if someone came to me and said, would you like to invest in a Marvel film? Firstly, I'd think they were full of shit, because why would they come to me? Secondly, I wouldn't be able to contribute a huge amount towards the bill, but I would quite happily hand over my entire life savings, because your investment's pretty safe at the minute with Marvel.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But he'll have a profit share on that, as well as gets an executive producer credit. He'll get paid a bit more, and then that'll be on top of his wedge for being the actor in it as well.
Right.
With that comes the creative control, as you say. Who better to ask than the person who's played it for, 10 years? You must have an infinity, not an infinity stone, but an affinity to the character when you've lived him for 10 years. There's a gap between the films, so you've got to kind of get in the zone. You leave it, you do something else, you come back, you do the Night Manager. There's definitely a commitment to it. I mean, it's like Tom Holland. Tom Holland's gone on record and said he'll do Spider-Man for as long as Sony wants him. And if they continue to turn over the money they have done, I can see him being there for a long time. We'll move on to Easter eggs if you haven't got any other questions.
I may interrupt you during your Easter eggs, because I'm sure you're going to raise a load of questions that I probably have thought of, but because I didn't write them down in my my copious amounts of notes.
Probably covered a lot of these anyway when we've been doing our normal talking. I made a note of the lift letters, which is not an Easter egg because I haven't actually worked out what they are. Usually when you have an Easter egg in films, for example, like usually car number plates normally reference comics when the people first shown up. Amazing Spider-Man, you have the letter on the number plate. So I've made note of the lift numbers only for personal purposes because I haven't quite worked out what they are.
Because you do.
Well, just because you never know if it came up, you might have asked me a question about what the symbols are.
What are the symbols?
The symbols that appear on the panel of the lift are a combination of alphabetical and numerical, which could be abbreviations for something. But then you've got what looks like a zero, basically. The one below it is an X, and the one below that is like an equal sign, and then a smiley face.
So it's clearly a teenager's written that lift because they've stuck the emoji smiley face at the end of it.
It could be a graffiti and no one's worked out and think it's some code. But at the moment, I made a note of it because I think it could allude to something later on in the show. We can come back to that. We've already mentioned the Avengers intro scene. What we didn't talk about actually, but we get what is essentially a callback to Iron Man when he lands in the Gobi Desert when Iron Man's first suit.
Yeah, it was very similar the way he just plunged into the sand
desert.
dune.
Yeah, the TVA is obviously canonical because it's in the comics, so it's not a new thing they've retconned in, but basically they were introduced in the 1986 issue of Thor.
Who had an enormous bout of sympathy for the special effects guys when they got out of the lift and looked out of the window to the TVA world, and I sat there and thought, oh shit man. So someone came in on Monday morning and went, right guys, so I need you to design me a special effects city from scratch. Are we using a city with landmarks as a boilerplate? Nope, from scratch, all special effects. It doesn't exist. Think Star Wars Episode 1 special effects levels, and at that point everyone went, hiya love, I'm probably not going to be home for the next 6 months. Tell me what the kids look like when they grow up. Love you lots. Bye. That's sort of the work that would have probably gone into for that.
When he was looking out the window, I was having a Cloud City when George Lucas made it more.
Yeah.
Because obviously Cloud City was just a corridor.
It didn't look amazing though. I know some people were quite keen on it, but I have to say I hate stuff that looks really artificial CG. Yeah. I really hate it, and part of the reason why the more recent Star Wars films are more my thing is because you've got the dirt on the ships and everything's filmed in reality. It's not all green or blue screen stuff. There's lots of realness to it, just that feeling of, but I guess because it's such a made up place I gave it a bit of a short sharp shrift and moved on. It didn't bug me too much, but I hope there isn't too much of that stuff.
I think because it was just a pick-up or a side.
Yeah, as long as that's all it is. It starts to become more and more, but I don't think it will because that's not Marvel's style, is it?
No, I mean I think when you're having exposition with a character sitting across the desk with somebody for a good couple of minutes becomes boring, so they'll have them walking down a corridor. We have the opposite when we're talking about Star Trek Discovery because all they do is walk down corridors.
Yeah.
So I imagine it was just a swipe.
Because I wasn't overly keen on the Miss Marvel films, you know, at the beginning of the first one, where I say the first one, there's only been one so far. Or has there? What timeline are we doing this in? At the beginning when she doesn't know she's human and they go into those different planets.
She's being trained and inducted.
Yeah, I don't like those kind of settings. They feel fake and it really takes me out of the film because it feels so artificial. Does that make sense?
No, it does, yeah, because I think at this stage they were probably trying to cram that much in.
That's what I'm slightly worried about. I mean, they've got so much good faith in the bank so far, Marvel and Feige. I'm happy to just see it out, but that's my big worry about where the universe goes from here, because up to this point you've had Iron Man who's real, doing real things in the real world. You've got Captain America who has powers, but there's still quite limited powers. I mean, he can't fly, he can't make himself disappear, you know, he's just strong. Fighting a bad guy on Earth is pretty straightforward. It started to get a bit more complicated when you introduce Thor, but Thor has some limited abilities, or whether or not he doesn't know the full extent of his powers, so that kind of works. Guardians of the Galaxy, it was a bit like, we're going into that sort of world, but that's quite a gritty way of doing it, so they've sidestepped that. Miss Marvel started to feel a bit Superman towards the end, and you know how I feel about about Superman?
I do.
And then, of course, you've destroyed Thanos, and now we're going to the wider universe. We've got the Eternals, that's a wider universe. You've got, obviously, this sort of multiverse thing, which Doctor Strange is going to wander down. And just at the back of my head, it's going, I hope this isn't going to become something that takes me out of it, because it feels so artificial.
If you look at the evolution of the films, you know, you had the Earth-based stories, then you went interplanetary to Asgard, then you took it one step further into space with Guardians, then you've taken it further again with the Eternals into not just space but deeper space. You've then got into the quantum realm, so that's another area you're going into. We'll just have to see how they do it, but hopefully they don't lose the threads.
No, so Spider-Man Homecoming, I don't want to lose films like that. I don't want to lose Iron Man 1. I don't want to lose the Captain America films. The feelings I got from them are loved. The feelings I got from the Guardians of the Galaxy are loved. Now that the worlds are starting to converge, there's just that air of nervousness that they're going to spoil it. But I guess that's because I love it so much, so I don't want them to spoil it. You're a bit more adverse to change because change creates risk. As I say, they've got enough goodwill in the bank for me to say, just let them do it. Have faith in the process, because they haven't fucked it up so far. So why would they do it now?
You think about Guardians of the Galaxy, it was an unknown.
Yeah.
It was a box office hit. You think if it was going to be a film that was a bit questionable, and I was concerned because not many people knew of the comics or in fact the characters, so you're thinking you're really going out on a trust with the viewer, and it worked, it paid off.
Well, you've got the Eternals, you've got a team of omnipotent beings, and it just sounds utterly dull. But then in the trailer, they've got one of them going, oh, well, shall I take over as the head of the Avengers now? Iron Man's not there, and now Steve Rogers isn't in charge. I think someone throws a quid back at him, and it's just little things like that will hopefully keep it grounded enough where you don't lose what we've loved up to this point.
The clever thing with that, with what you just said, is Marvel is that good. Referred to him as Steve Rogers, not Captain America. They know he's no longer Captain America.
Yeah.
How good is that? It wouldn't have mattered, would it? I can't remember who said it.
It was him. It was a guy, wasn't it?
He could have gone to Captain America and nobody would have, well, apart from purists, would have picked up on it. But that's Marvel. The fact that they went Steve Rogers, it's acknowledging that they know he's not Captain America anymore. Amazing. But no, you're absolutely spot on. I hope they don't have too many threads to tie it all in. So moving on, we mentioned the Skrull inside the TVA. Now he's wearing a tracksuit, and I'll go on to the next Easter egg.
I missed the Skrull.
Goes into the reception area.
No, this is why I need to watch it a second time, because I'll pick up on these things.
Okay, and I'll come on to the tracksuit in a minute because that's important. So that's the first one.
Well, it is, because of course he just might have wanted comfy pants on. I mean, we all do in lockdown.
He may have been slumming it. We've already mentioned the life model decoys. These were obviously things that popped up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and obviously in the Marvel Comics. Secret Wars, which is another show that's coming soon, which is going to feature Nick Fury and in fact the Skrull that we saw in Captain Marvel and in Spider-Man Far From Home. That came from the introduction. It explains about all the interdimensional timelines trying to vie for supremacy, and that alludes to the Secret Wars comic event that happened in 2015. I'm looking forward to the Secret Wars show, if I'm being honest. The little remote controls that we were laughing at where she was getting messed around, it's called the retroactive canon in the Marvel Comics, so they've just made a smaller version of that. The timekeepers we spoke about were introduced in the 1970s Thor comic. They were the remnants of the last remaining part of the universe before its destruction. We have the Kree and Nova's attack on Titan, which is the homeworld to Thanos. Miss Minutes explains about the uprising, and it talked about the blue people, the Kree and Nova Corps. In the Guardians of the Galaxy, Ronan confirmed that the Kree and the Nova Corps were at war for 1,000 years, and as I mentioned, the additional bonus Easter egg was Tara Strong voiced Harley Quinn. The Skrull in the reception area, who's wearing a tracksuit, could be one of the tracksuit Draculas, which is a mafia-style organisation that operated in New York that Hawkeye dealt with, which could spin into the Hawkeye series.
Okay. I suppose the only thing I'd say to that is I'm struggling to get excited about the Hawkeye TV series in the same way as I'm struggling slightly to get excited about the Black Widow, because as we understand it, Marvel aren't always completely obvious and open with us about stuff. This is kind of the end of the road for the Hawkeye character, and we know it's the end of the road for the Black Widow character, so it's a bit like, what's the point in watching these shows? Now I'm going to obviously watch them, and I'm no doubt I'll probably thoroughly enjoy them, but it's quite hard to get excited about them in the same way as this, because this feels like it's opening doors to exciting things that are to come, whereas the Black Widow and the Hawkeye still feel like I'm closing the doors that are behind me, and that's not quite as exciting.
Black Widow is a bitter pill.
Yeah.
Because not because of the fact that you know that she's already dead, but they've waited 2 years to be reminded of the fact that she died 2019.
I mean, obviously there's a couple of things that are going to be in that movie which will tie into things like the Falcon series. So Miss Hydra, Lady Doodah, she's in Black Widow, which obviously, and And we're supposed to have seen that before Falcon, so that when she walks inside, we go, right, oh, hello, it's you again. So there's little things like that which will no doubt feed in, but these are almost like really, really subtly small introductions to things that don't feel that. When we're talking about beings that control time and beings that created the universe, when we're talking about what Black Widow, a normal human being with no superpowers, can do, it kind of feels a bit small fry. And it's a bit same with Hawkeye, which is why it's a shame they didn't have these things before the end game, because I would have been really more excited about knowing more about them, because they're part of the Avengers, whereas now they're kind of not.
I think the Hawkeye specifically is to springboard the young Avengers, because he's training his daughter up, who was blinked away.
Maybe with Black Widow is as well.
Well, I think Black Widow is going to go into Thunderbolts. General Ross is coming back.
What's Thunderbolts then?
It's General Ross because he's Red Hulk.
Right.
He sits around with the serum that Hulk is playing with. He becomes Red Hulk. She-Hulk is going to have Daredevil in it because She-Hulk's a lawyer and Daredevil will be back into that. He may also be introduced into Spider-Man because that's his mate, because he finds him in a wheelie bin and then takes him to Night Nurse. Thunderbolt Ross could well be in that. I know Tim Roth is going back in to reprise his role as Abomination for She-Hulk. So I think you could well have all that going on, and it leads to the Thunderbolts. And then the Nexus events, mentioning that one path can lead to another Nexus event, which is what the TVA try and avoid, which has happened in the MCU a few times. The first one in Age of Ultron in Oslo, the Nexus in the WandaVision fake commercials. So the MCU have mentioned Nexus a few times. That's what I found this week. I mean, I'm sure there's others that I missed.
Plenty there to be had, isn't there?
I mean, I'm sure a lot of the things will evolve. I'm quite interested about the lift buttons to see where that goes. Cause that
You're obsessed with the lift, are you?
Can't see why you'd bother with that level of intricacy unless it means something later on. Because unless those buttons, you press them and they go to a different timeline and they mean something, we'll come back to it. So
we're in danger of going down another rabbit hole. Fantastic. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully we've shed some light on it. I know I feel slightly better armed for episode 2, and I'm going to go back and watch the first one again. Thank Christ Mark was here. If you've enjoyed it, give us a review. It's always good to get some positive feedback. It helps more people see the show. If you want to get in touch, you can email us at the2marks@thepodstation.co.uk. But God, if you've got enough time on your hands to send an email, then I don't know, maybe you need to get another hobby. But feel free to contact us. I don't know, it'd be nice to hear from you. DM us on social media. That's always good. Probably the best place to get hold of us if you want to throw some comments in there. Let us know what your thoughts are. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have we missed something? If we have, let us know. I think that'll do us for today, won't it?
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, we'll catch you next week with episode 2.
Yes. Take care.
Bye.
Excelsior.
Get social at the 2 Marks on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Also check them out on YouTube.